A young lawyer travels to an old mansion to sell a new house to the Count who resides there. However, the buyer turns out to be an ancient monster hunting the lawyer's wife, the most formidable king of the undead, Nosferatu. This is Reteller, and that's a recap of the movie Nosferatu. The story begins in the early 19th century. Young Ellen prays to her guardian angel at night, begging him to save her from loneliness and sorrow. A dark shadow answers her call, speaking to her in a foreign tongue and luring her outside. After a moonlit walk, Ellen falls into a trance, sees a horrific creature, and begins convulsing. Not in a graceful dance, but in an epileptic seizure. Years pass, and the year 1838 arrives. Ellen now lives in the German city of Wisburg with her husband and their cat. Her husband, Thomas Hutter, works as a real estate agent under Mr. Knock. His employer promises him a promotion if Thomas succeeds in an important assignment. He must travel to Bohemia, not for a musical rhapsody, but to finalize a property sale with a local aristocrat, Count Orlok. When Thomas shares the news, his wife becomes distressed. She is plagued by dark visions and nightmares in which Thomas appears slightly dead, but he must take the job to pay off their debts. To ease Ellen's worries, Thomas sends her to stay with their friends, shipowner Friedrich Harding and his wife Anna, who are raising twin daughters and expecting a third child. That night, troubled by anxiety, Ellen cuts off a lock of her hair. Meanwhile, Thomas's employer, Mr. Knock, performs occult rituals in an indecently naked state. The next morning, as she sees her husband off, Ellen gives Thomas a medallion containing her hair, a reminder not to wander after the Bohemian girls. Thomas mounts his horse and rides toward his new assignment. Upon arriving in Bohemia, he checks into a roadside inn where the local gypsies inexplicably mock him, at least until the innkeeper appears. Thomas barely manages to rent a bed in the gloomy, unwelcoming house. Later that evening, he notices a strange procession outside his window. A line of gypsies leads a horse carrying a naked girl toward the cemetery. There, they dig up a grave, retrieve a coffin, open the lid, and drive a metal stake into the corpse. Thomas is horrified and suddenly wakes up in his bed. Only the dirt on his feet proves he really had wandered through the cemetery. In the morning, finding that all the residents have vanished, along with his horse, Thomas sets out on foot into the mountains toward Count Orlok's castle. After nightfall, he encounters a moving carriage with no driver. Nearly running him over, it magically turns sideways across the road and opens its door for him. Thomas rides toward the castle through picturesque landscapes, accompanied by a pack of wolves. Soon he arrives at the castle gates, where a mysterious figure silently greets him and leads him inside. There, the guest finally meets the enigmatic and terrifying Count Orlok. Thomas presents the documents, which the Count, teleporting around the dining hall, carefully examines while offering the visitor a meal. During dinner, Thomas accidentally cuts his hand, attracting the Count's unsettling attention. Orlok approaches in a frightening manner, promising to heal the wound, and Thomas faints. He wakes up on the dining room floor at dawn. Wandering the abandoned castle, he finds a mirror and notices strange marks on his chest, as if from the bite of a wild animal. By nightfall, the Count is ready to sign the agreement. Thomas hesitates as the document is written in an unfamiliar language, and people of the 19th century were not known for signing contracts blindly. Orlok notices Ellen's medallion, asks to inspect it, and forgets to return it. The Count insists Thomas sign, offering a pouch of gold as reward. Wanting to finish the ordeal quickly, Thomas signs the papers and asks to leave immediately, citing poor health. But the host insists he stay until he recovers. The next morning, Thomas finds the wounds on his chest worsening. Understanding that something is terribly wrong, he tries to escape, but the castle gates are locked. While exploring, he descends into the basement and discovers an ornate carved coffin, the kind reserved for the most stylish of the dead. Inspecting the occult markings, he removes the lid. Inside lies the resting Count. Grabbing a pickaxe, Thomas decides to kill the monster. But Orlok suddenly awakens, frightening the would-be slayer. First, the Count sniffs Ellen's lock of hair, then commands a sinister shadow to pursue Thomas, bending him to his will. Locked in his room, Thomas opens the door while in a trance, allowing the vampire to drink his blood. In Wisburg, Ellen begins to fall under the sinister influence of the Count. Wandering outside in a daze, she leaves the house and later is examined by Dr. Wilhelm Sievers. He dismisses her sleepwalking as emotional distress and doses her with an opium tincture. The next morning, Thomas wakes to find himself guarded by black dogs. He climbs through the window onto a ledge and, like a seasoned assassin, performs a leap of faith. Back in Wisburg, Ellen sinks deeper into melancholy, fearing something terrible has happened to her husband. While staying with the Hardings, the family witnesses one of her epileptic fits. Dr. Sievers is informed about a new patient who strangled several sheep with his bare hands and devoured their raw meat. The newest resident of the asylum turns out to be none other than Mr. Knock, the man who sent Thomas to Count Orlok. Sitting far from polite society, Knock rants about the imminent arrival of his master and imitates Ozzy Osbourne, only he bites the heads off pigeons instead of bats. He even attempts to bite the doctor, but a kind nurse promptly calms him down with a well-placed baton. Later, after observing another of Ellen's episodes, Dr. Sievers admits to Friedrich Harding that he cannot find a cure for her condition. But there is good news. His mentor, Professor Albin Eberhard von Franz, is visiting the city. The man is extremely knowledgeable. Thomas is pulled from the river by the nuns of an Orthodox monastery. After reviving him, they urge him to remain within the holy walls, where evil cannot reach him. But Thomas knows he must return home. The infernal count, carrying Ellen's medallion for its scent, is already traveling toward Wisburg by sea, hiding in a crate that substitutes for a coffin. The ship's crew begins encountering strange misfortunes, with sailors dying under mysterious circumstances. One night, a sailor descends into the hold with an axe to uncover the source of the calamity. But after opening the crate, he realizes they are all doomed. Instead of the sinister vampire, hundreds of plague-ridden rats spill out, and the vampire himself lurks nearby, waiting to strike. Soon, the now empty vessel races toward the shore at full speed. Dr. Sievers and Friedrich visit Professor von Franz. The professor immediately assures them that Ellen's affliction lies far beyond the limits of medicine. It is a sign of true evil. Visiting Ellen, he asks her to describe her visions. That night, when she falls into another trance, he examines her again. To prove she is under a dark influence, he pricks her hand with a needle. She does not react to the pain. When von Franz recites a prayer to banish the spirit, the Count suddenly speaks through her. The professor concludes that they are dealing with a powerful mythical creature, a vampire known as the Nosferatu, a legend found in cultures across the world. Meanwhile, Knock suffers another violent episode. When the orderlies untie him for examination, he attacks a guard and escapes. That night, sensing someone's approach, Ellen runs outside and meets the exhausted Thomas. Soon after, Friedrich is summoned by the authorities. One of his ships has crashed onto the shore, releasing hundreds of plague rats from its shattered hull. Loyal Knock has already retrieved the crate and is transporting it to a secluded estate intended as a new lair. By morning, the city is overrun with rats from the wrecked ship, spreading disease. Dr. Sievers and Professor von Franz examine the body of a dead sailor. Despite showing signs of plague, the corpse is completely drained of blood. They are also informed that Knock has escaped the asylum. That same night, Count Orlok extends his hand over the city. A massive black shadow stretches across the streets toward the Harding residence, where Ellen and a recovering Thomas are staying. Bitten by the vampire, Thomas sees the tempter in a fevered vision and instinctively pushes his wife away. Terrified, Ellen asks Anna, who has just put the children to bed, to stay with her until the fear subsides. But as soon as they drift into sleep, Ellen imagines a visit from the infamous Count. Orlok tells her that her plea years ago awakened him and bound their souls together forever. He has come to claim her, having already tricked Thomas into signing an annulment of their marriage in exchange for a handful of gold. Now the Count needs the girl's voluntary consent to become his concubine. Ellen realizes that the vampire deceived her husband and refuses to obey him. Orlok then switches to alternative negotiation tactics. He threatens that over the next 3 nights, he will take away everyone she loves unless she submits completely. The Count departs, and Ellen wakes up in bed. She notices Anna is no longer beside her. Anna lies lifeless on the floor, being devoured by plague-ridden rats. In the morning, Ellen tries to explain to Friedrich that the monstrous creature was responsible for what happened to his wife, but he refuses to believe such ideas and demands that his guest and her sick husband leave the house. Ellen and Thomas are forced to walk home through streets piled with corpses, where rats roam freely, continuing to spread the plague. Meanwhile, the professor and the doctor search the home of the escaped Knock. They find a book of occult rituals and traces of ceremonies conducted there. They return to Friedrich's house, only to discover he has driven Ellen and Thomas away. That evening, as Thomas begins to recover, the couple quarrels. Ellen confesses her long-standing connection to the mysterious Count, whom she accidentally summoned in a moment of despair, and then accuses Thomas of never writing to her. Overwhelmed, she suffers another seizure and falls into a trance. After regaining consciousness, she apologizes, and their reconciliation quickly turns into passionate intimacy. In the midst of it, Orlok intrudes telepathically, triggering yet another fit in Ellen. Offended to the core of his foul undead soul by such betrayal, the Count decides to make good on his earlier promise. Orlok slips into the Harding home, where the valiant Friedrich sleeps clutching a pistol. The man doesn't even awaken as his wife senses the danger. Anna rushes to the children's bedroom, only to find the Count draining the last drop of blood from her daughters, before he turns on her as well. In the morning, Anna and her daughters are buried. The grief-stricken Friedrich notices Ellen standing with Professor von Franz. In hysteria, he tries to drive her away, blaming her for the tragedy. Thomas and Dr. Sievers manage to calm him down. On the road back to the city, the group discusses their plan to hunt Orlok. The professor explains that all legends about the Nosferatu contain one shared detail. The vampire must return before sunrise to the soil in which he was originally buried. If they can locate his lair and consecrate that soil, he will have nowhere to return. But this is only a diversion. Having studied Nock's occult book the previous night, von Franz has learned that the vampire can be destroyed only by the voluntary sacrifice of a pure maiden who lies with him until dawn. He secretly reveals this to Ellen, the very woman Orlok has chosen. Gathering their courage, the men set out in search of the coffin, all except the broken Friedrich. He returns to the crypt where he buried his wife and children. Showing signs of plague, he removes his wife's body from the coffin in a final act of unnatural desperation. There, Thomas and the others later find him dead. They burn the bodies to prevent further spread of the curse. Now reduced to a trio, the vampire hunters move toward the estate purchased earlier by Nock. Spotting a coffin, Thomas pries it open and drives a stake into the body inside, only to discover it is not the Count but his loyal servant, Nock. Meanwhile, the real Orlok is already on his way to Ellen, who awaits him according to von Franz's hidden plan. Realizing what is happening, Thomas races across the city toward his wife, while his companions burn the vampire's coffin. Dressed in a bridal gown, Ellen waits for the Count to arrive. Orlok indulges in vile passion, draining her life force along with her blood. The act stretches on until sunrise. When the first rays of light enter the room, Ellen embraces the rotting undead body, holding the Count in her arms until his inevitable destruction. Thomas finds his wife dead in their bed, still clutching the crumbling corpse. Professor von Franz scatters flowers over her body, reminding them that through her sacrifice, Ellen saved them all from the monstrous supernatural evil threatening to annihilate the entire city. On this tragic note, the film ends.